Right now, the PGA Tour has a problem it cannot afford to ignore. Scottie Scheffler, the man whose name alone sells out tournaments, moves sponsor dollars, and keeps television ratings alive, has had enough, not frustrated enough to vent on a podcast, not annoyed enough to post a cryptic social media comment, enough to draw a line. 3 specific rules, 3 things he wants gone. And until they are, the tour's biggest asset is making his position unmistakably clear. Here is what makes this moment different from every other player complaint. When a journeyman grieves about tour policy, commissioners shrug. When the world number one, a man who has never needed the tour more than the tour needs him, starts identifying rules by name, the panic in the boardroom is real. Most fans already sense something is broken. The restructuring, the schedule chaos, the locker room tension spilling into public. You have felt it building. But Scheffler is not just expressing frustration about the direction of the sport. He is telling the tour exactly what has to go. Personally, I think he is right, but I want to know where you stand. Drop your take in the comments below. If this story matters to you, subscribe, because what happens next is going to reshape professional golf entirely. To understand why Scheffler's position carries the weight it does, you need to feel the pressure already crushing the tour before he said a single word. This is not one unhappy superstar reacting to one bad week. The infrastructure of professional golf is being dismantled and rebuilt from scratch, and the people actually playing the game were barely consulted. Field sizes got cut. Full field events dropped from 156 players to 144. Smaller events shrunk from 132 to 120. The tour packaged it as a pace of play improvement. Veterans like Lucas Glover called that explanation insulting. Matt Fitzpatrick said publicly that pace of play gets raised as a concern every single year, and nothing ever changes. The cuts happened regardless. Then came something that cut far deeper: fully exempt tour cards, the guaranteed status that players grind their entire careers to secure, slashed from 125 down to 100. 25 players who had earned their place on tour lost it without meaningful negotiation. A decision handed down, not discussed. Sitting above all of that, a structural overhaul arriving in 2028 so significant that the locker room has not cooled since the framework leaked. A 2-tier system modeled on Premier League promotion and relegation dropped onto a sport that was built entirely around individual freedom and merit. The details of what that system would actually mean for the game's biggest names, details the tour has been careful not to broadcast too loudly, are exactly what pushed Scheffler's frustration past the point of private complaint. What those details actually mean for Scheffler personally is something the tour desperately hoped would stay quiet. Players are furious. Sponsors are measuring the temperature carefully. The tour's relationship with its own athletes is fracturing at the worst possible moment. Because above the PGA Tour entirely, a second war is being fought, one that does not involve field sizes or card counts, one that targets the physical game itself. The USGA and the R&A announced the golf ball rollback. From 2028, professionals must use a ball that travels meaningfully shorter than the one they play today. The governing bodies framed it as course preservation. Modern players hit so far that historic venues have been made irrelevant. Independent testing placed the distance loss between 15 and 20 yards for certain players. Justin Thomas asked publicly whether athletics authorities would lengthen the mile so the fastest time does not change, whether the NBA would raise the hoop because players now jump higher. Bryson DeChambeau called it the most uninspiring decision the sport's leadership had ever made. Rory McIlroy sided with the governing bodies, arguing the change barely affects the average golfer and puts the sport on a sustainable path. The biggest names in the game split in half, fighting each other publicly over the future of their profession. Through all of it, the world number one watched, measured, waited. When Scheffler finally decided to stop waiting, what he said made clear this was never just about distance. Scottie Scheffler does not operate like Thomas or DeChambeau. He is not loud. He does not chase controversy. Every word he speaks publicly is chosen with precision, which is exactly why, when he speaks, the entire sport stops to listen. His core issue with the people running golf is not technical. It is not about yardage numbers or field size mathematics. At the center of every complaint Scheffler has made about the direction of professional golf is one principle. When the decisions being made by those in power take skill out of the game and replace it with luck, the sport loses the thing that makes it worth competing in. That principle became impossible to contain after the 2025 PGA Championship at Quail Hollow. The course was soaked from heavy rain. Officials decided against allowing preferred lies, meaning players could not lift, clean, and place their golf balls on the fairway. Scheffler hit a perfect drive. His ball picked up mud on landing. That mud ball sent his approach shot sideways. Double bogey on the 16th hole, not because his swing failed, but because a rules decision left randomness in charge of the outcome. He was direct afterward. A competition built around skill had been turned into something closer to a lottery. The best player does not always win a lottery. That frustration did not fade. At the 2026 PGA Championship at Erin Hills, Aaron Rai claimed the trophy on a setup that Scheffler and other top players openly criticized. Pin positions, green speeds, overall severity. The setup produced a bunched leaderboard where the best players felt the course was not separating the field the way elite competition should. When the world number one questions publicly whether a major championship is actually rewarding the best golf, that is not a complaint, that is an indictment. And the indictment kept building, because Scheffler had already said something in 2025 that most people treated as a passing comment, but now reads as a warning the tour completely failed to take seriously. He described professional golf as not a fulfilling life. He stated clearly that if the sport began to affect his family, he would walk away from competing entirely. A man who has already drawn that line privately does not bluff when he draws one publicly. 3 rules are sitting at the center of all of this, each one a direct target, and the tour has no clean answer for any of them. Here is why the panic inside the PGA Tour is real and not manufactured. Scheffler is not the kind of player the tour can weather losing. Rory McIlroy stepping back hurt broadcast numbers and sponsor energy visibly. Tiger Woods missing from the field changed television ratings for years after his injuries. Scheffler's commercial value to the tour right now operates at that same level. His name in the field moves attendance, activates sponsors, and anchors broadcast promotion in a way no other active player currently matches. Losing him to injury or age would be painful. Losing him because the tour built the conditions that made him leave, that is a crisis with a cause attached, one the tour owns entirely. And the 2026 U.S. Open adds a layer of pressure to all of this that makes the timing almost impossible to believe. The championship runs June 18th through the 21st at Shinnecock Hills, hosted by the USGA, the same governing body whose decisions Scheffler's peers have spent months publicly dismantling. Shinnecock has its own history of swallowing great players whole. The 2018 U.S. Open, there produced a third-round scoring average above 75. Players walked off the course, calling the setup broken, the exact kind of chaos, luck overriding skill, randomness punishing precision, that Scheffler has been warning against for over a year. Scheffler has never won the U.S. Open, the Masters twice, the PGA Championship, the Claret Jug at Royal Portrush, conquered, one major missing from the career Grand Slam, capturing it at Shinnecock against a USGA setup on a course with that history would be the ultimate validation of everything he has argued. Losing to the chaos he predicted would make his warnings look like prophecy. The tour knows all of this, which is why the 3 rules Scheffler wants abolished are not being dismissed quietly inside the offices of the PGA Tour. They are being discussed with a level of urgency that the tour has not applied to player feedback in years. Now it is time to talk about exactly what those 3 rules are and why each one represents something the tour cannot defend. Rule 1 targets the 2-tier system's player restriction. The detail the tour buried inside the 2028 framework, hoping it would not generate the reaction it deserved. Players in the top tier, the elite track, will be strongly discouraged and, according to multiple sources, outright prevented from entering lower tier events. Administratively, it sounds like a scheduling policy. In practice, it means the tour gains the power to dictate which tournaments its own best players are allowed to enter. For most players, that would be an irritation. For Scheffler, it is something else entirely. The CJ Cup Byron Nelson is where he made his first PGA Tour start at 17 years old, his sister carrying his bag on the course at TPC Craig Ranch. Those roots are not sentimental background detail, they are personal history that no corporate framework has the right to override. Under the new structure, the tour could ban him from that tournament, not because his game does not belong there. Because a tier restriction says so, Scheffler wants that rule gone. Rule 2 cuts into the actual physical game in a way the Rollback supporters have consistently underestimated. Scheffler's objection is not that driving distances will shrink. His specific stated concern is that the Rollback does not affect all players equally. Some will lose 2 or 3 yards and continue playing their natural game. Others, the precision drivers, the players who generate distance through technique and trajectory control rather than raw power, will lose 15 to 20 yards and watch their entire competitive model collapse underneath them. His argument goes further than any other player has taken it publicly. The real problem is not that players hit too far. The real problem is that courses and setups have been designed to reward power above all other skills, narrowing the game into a distance competition, and then proposing to fix it by penalizing the players who adapted most skillfully to that environment. The blunt instrument of a ball rollback does not solve a design problem. It creates a new unfairness on top of an existing one. Scheffler wants that rule abolished. Rule 3 is the one with the most visible damage trail because fans watched it play out across multiple events this season and felt the wrongness of it in real time without necessarily having the language to explain why. The preferred lies rule was applied during the final round of the Valero Texas Open, then across both the 3rd and 4th rounds of the Zurich Classic, then again during the final round of the Cadillac Championship at Doral. Each time the reaction from galleries and viewers turned negative. Each time players were left wondering what criteria had actually triggered the decision. Scheffler's position is precise. Preferred lies exist as a rule because golf's governing bodies recognized that certain conditions make fair competition impossible without intervention. If that principle is sound enough to build a rule around, and it is, then the application of that rule must follow consistent, clearly defined standards, not a different judgment call at each event based on whatever the ruling committee decides on a given morning. The mud ball at Quail Hollow was not bad luck inside a fair system. It was the consequence of a deliberate decision not to apply a protection that existed specifically to prevent that outcome. Scheffler wants that inconsistency abolished and replaced with a standard that means something. 3 rules, each one built around the same foundation. Skill decides the winner, not luck, not corporate access restrictions, not inconsistent officiating applied differently across different weeks. Skill. The tour has a choice to make, and based on everything Scheffler has said and done, he is not waiting indefinitely for the answer. In 2025, Scheffler described professional golf as not a fulfilling life and made clear the sport's grip on him is not unconditional. That statement came before the 2-tier restriction details emerged, before Aaron Hills, before the ball rollback debate consumed the locker room through the early weeks of 2026. A man who said that then facing what he is facing now is not posturing when he refuses to accept rules he considers fundamentally wrong. The tour built its commercial future around Scheffler's dominance at a moment when the game needed a face after the LIV fracture and the uncertainty around McIlroy's intentions. Scheffler delivered that stability. 4 majors, sustained world #1 status, the kind of consistent excellence that gives sponsors certainty and broadcast partners something to build storylines around. Demanding that stability without respecting the principles of the man providing it is the miscalculation sitting at the heart of this entire standoff. Scheffler is not asking for special treatment. He is asking for a game where the best player wins because he played the best golf, not because the chaos broke in his favor on a Sunday afternoon. The 3 rules he wants abolished all point to the same thing. A version of professional golf where outcomes are decided by merit, where a 17-year-old who made his first tour start with his sister on the bag can still choose to go back to that tournament as the world #1 without a corporate tier system telling him he cannot. Where the ball in his hands performs consistently for every player, not disproportionately punishing the ones who built their game on precision, where a perfect drive stays a perfect drive instead of becoming a mud ball because officials decided not to use a rule that was sitting right there waiting to be applied. That is what Scottie Scheffler is refusing to accept. That is what the PGA Tour is in panic about. And right now, with the U.S. Open at Shinnecock Hills approaching, run by the USGA, set up on a course with a documented history of turning skill into survival, the world #1 is walking into the biggest test of his career, carrying the weight of all 3 fights simultaneously. If he wins, every word he has said becomes monument. If the chaos catches him, his warnings become the story the sport cannot escape. Either way, those 3 rules are not going away. Scheffler has made certain of that, and the tour is running out of time. If you think Scheffler is right, and these rules need to go, type Rule 1, Rule 2, or Rule 3 below, whichever one you believe is doing the most damage to the sport right now. And if you are not subscribed yet, this is the moment, because what the tour decides next changes professional golf, and you will want to be here when it does.